Chapter 1. Surely I am asleep. I roll onto my left side and continue deeper into the dream. I know this memory, although it has been a while. I remember holding the rail of the ship, made of American live oak, worn dark and smooth over its grain and knots by years of seamen's hands. I was looking towards the east, where dark clouds churned over a rainstorm ahead, and heard small rumblings of thunder. There was a cooler breeze from the north, cool especially for late August in the North Atlantic. My father was taking me by sea for my first term at a magical school in the British Isles. We were 3 days out from Boston in 1812. It was about midday. My father, John Tellafrog, holding my shoulder. "British man of war, 3 o'clock!" a sailor from the crow's nest yelled. We both swiveled our heads in the direction he was pointing to, then forward and to the right, and I detected something. The captain came out of his cabin, down onto our deck, and extended his spyglass. Sailors rushed forward. They were likely hoping to outrun orders to station, and some did, gathering in their mismatched garb common with non-commissioned ranks aboard ship as far forward as they dared go.
"General quarters, men! Be ready for command! Prepare starboard guns!"
The captain bellowed, steady but in charge. I looked at my father. He, too, was calm, but attentive to the British ship. Sailors ran fore and aft, up ropes to the sail and below to the gun. After that alarming command, I ceased to recall any specific details of the ship and crew. I had gone from the cusp of an adventure to cross the sea and attend a real school to the real prospect of death. Relations in 1812 between the Americans and the British were at war footing, and at sea, any ship was subject to firing on or seizure. Despite the salty spray of the ocean crashing into the oaken hull of the ship, my mouth went dry. That I remember. It was the first time fear had an unsettling effect on me physically. Father stated calmly, "We are aboard a commercial ship, son. Just passengers. Not a concern to that naval vessel." His eyes narrowed as he spoke, but he continued watching the other ship. I could perceive that my father, a pillar of stalwart fortitude to my young mind, may have told me a fib to ease my troubled mind. I, however, knew commercial vessels, as he had put it, weren't actually armed as such, so why the cry from the captain to man the guns? That may have been added by my subconscious later, as a question I might have asked, but didn't. Sometimes dreams and actual memory merge, and we remember things the way we want, not always the way they happened. It was many years ago, after all. I, too, looked towards the British ship ahead, only to spot puffs of white smoke around the bow, and huge splashes of water showered the ship, followed by the slower sound of the shots. Father swung his left arm off the railing and around me, hustling us towards the rear of the ship.
"Home! Hard aboard! Into the storm!"
the captain shouted as we passed each other near the rear.
"Starboard battery! Prepare to fire!"
Now I was sure Dad had tried to calm my fears, but the danger was about to become real, and there was no sense in trying to avoid it. Perhaps the captain had seen their gun doors opening and being rolled out on the British ship. The rain began spattering all around us, and then it sheathed us in a blinding downpour. Father and I reached the top of the rear of the ship, barely soon enough to grab the railing as the port turn lunged the ship hard. We could neither hear the other ship nor see its flashes now because of the rain and the thunder of the storm. Father reached into his rucksack and pulled out his broom. I glanced around because of the rules of magic in the sight of non-magical people, but between the storm and the unfolding conflict, no one was around. He slung one strap of his rucksack over his left shoulder, grabbed me with his right hand, and instantly we shot straight up into the clouds. I held on as tightly as possible. Father looked up and ahead. I looked below, where we had come from, and saw our ship faintly outlined. The British ship was closing the distance. They were no more than a half-mile apart now. More flashes from their cannons. Then the American ship's right side fired. The flight began to level out, so I took a look around. We were still in some rain, but surrounded, like in a courtyard, by dark, heavy clouds, lightning passing within them, the colors of which changed depending on the density of the clouds and the strength of the flare. Thunder ripped around us, alternating between tremendous cracks that jolted my chest with changing air pressures and low rumbling like a boulder rolling down a hill of hard rock. We came to a halt, still, but bobbing a bit in the gusts. I heard a sound which wasn't thunder, more like a raspy, rough wind slicing to our left. Father, hearing it, promptly turned away from it. "What was the sound, Father?" I asked.
"Rather not."
He stopped, looked left, then above us, and was silent. It was the unmistakable form in those gray clouds of a dragon. I had never seen one, but had the feeling it would be best had I not. Its motion suggested it was either circling us or the ships below. Neither made sense, but Father was concerned with getting the pair of us out of this situation and nothing else. So I kept my grip as tight as I could. Father turned left and right swiftly. My small 11-year-old hands were beginning to show the limits of their strength. I winced, pinched shut my eyes, and trusted my father. When he slowed and began to hover again, I opened my eyes for a second. Only a second, but I remember thinking. The dragon was right in front of us, and Father let go with his left hand and pulled his wand with one motion and cast a spell I still can't remember the name of. An enormous cone of pure white light went forth from it, I guess, blinding the dragon, who veered to our left out of the cone. No sooner had it turned, in fear, I suppose, its wing caught the front of the broom, and I fell off, ripping my small hands and crossed feet with painful force from the wet handle of the broom. The dragon dove as it went away. I could have mounted it like a horse, I thought as I fell. Silly mind of a child. I was falling, and there was nothing I could do. All of this happened so fast, but it seemed slow in my few dreams of recollection. I suppose that is how we absorb amazing things. Every sensation, every aspect, so clearly. A blinding flash of lightning came from those rolling black clouds above and around us, striking the side of the dragon, then encasing me in its crackling blue-white energy, and then towards the sea below. I looked at my father, who was already pointing his broom straight at me, racing to try and catch me, and everything went dark and quiet. That was 25 years ago, and also the event that coincided with my loss of magical ability.
"Screech! Screech!"
came the unique sound of my owl, McCourt. The light coming into my tent was quite bright, unusual, as I'm usually up quite early. Deciding to indulge that dream, or memory, had cost me perhaps half an hour. I always feel, for some reason, it is important to relive the episode when it presents itself. Never sure why. Maybe it's healthy to be reminded now and again that you aren't as special as you thought you might be at one time. Nevertheless, I must get up and to work, as it is. After all, it's the only way to catch the female emerald glowworms of this area, and they're quite important to why I am here. I may still find some at this hour, and I guess McCourt wants his breakfast as well. The fire in my small stove is out. Usually it lasts all night. One of the drawbacks to not being magical anymore, I guess. Mother and Father always raised me to actively look for the good things every day, but so many things are made simpler by magic, like not getting cold at night, or having a fire that tends itself, so you can have hot water and cook eggs when you wake up. I sat up and went to the door flap of my tent, opening it so McCourt could come inside. He glided in and sat on the perch, a letter in his beak. I took the letter and set it on my travel desk, open the jar of night crawlers, and set it on his hook so he could have some. He will go and find some field mice later, I'm sure, or a nice shrew, but luckily my strange owl likes the worms I give him. With a few sticks of firewood standing up over the leftover pieces of charcoal, then using a large splinter of rich pine in the flame of the lantern to light it, off my little fire goes. I shut the door and change into my clothes, lacing my boots tight in case I get a chance to head up the rocky face along the north side of the lake today. I still need some red-headed rock gripper feathers, and those little birds only nest here, amongst the scree along the mountain face of Lake Königssee. After dressing and eating some breakfast, I finally turned my attention to the letter. It's from Magnus Templeton, a former teacher at my school and a family friend. He is the one who convinced the school to allow me to study there to completion, even though I had lost the ability to see, use, or create magic, spells, charms, and the like. There are very few who have lost their ability to use magic, and although I can use some magical or charmed objects and tools, they were hoping to study my case to determine if it's a reversible condition. Although we discovered the things I can do, and that my physical and sensory abilities are heightened somewhat, no recovery of the inherent magic I was born with was made. Professor Templeton's letter was brief, merely stating that my father had sent word to him that he wasn't feeling well and asking for his advice. Templeton asked me to come to him at once. He had arranged for me to travel on Austria's first long section of railroad and both carriage and ferry ship transport back to London, with tickets paid for at each station. Another advantage of magic. His couriers can dislocate to anywhere in an instant. I can't. Oh well, now that I'm 35 years old, I'm not only accustomed to it, I rather enjoy it. Father can't travel if he isn't well. The use of great magic, such as dislocation, requires physical cost. Besides, as warden of a territorial prison for criminal witches and wizards, if he isn't well, Mother also can't leave. Besides, maybe there isn't a thing to worry about. I wrote a brief response to Professor Templeton, thanking him for the accommodations and asking him to please forward my concern and anticipation of returning home to my parents. His methods will result in much faster word to them than any of my means. After McCourt finishes his breakfast, I give him a good drink of water and send him off with the letter. I begin to pack up things, and with all the sample jars, notebooks, drawing materials, and canvas bags of foliage and feathers that are valuable, I have far too much to fit into the 2 cases I have. I've often thought it was a fault, collecting so many discoveries. Even though upon each return to the school, the sheer number of samples and notebooks of new information is greeted with happiness. I have served in this capacity, receiving grants for my research, for several years now. There is still considerable resistance to my actually teaching, and I suppose they are right. Little interest lies in physical sciences relating to magic being taught by one who cannot perform any magic. Walking outside, the sky is quite blue with bright sunshine. Not a cloud in sight. Honestly, the stone and wood of the mountains surrounding this incredible lake are so beautiful that I can imagine myself living here one day. The meadows are full of aromas and life. The summer's warmth seems to make everything bloom brighter. Food is more delicious, and the autumn, oh goodness, is even more incredible. Its colors and the wild fragrances as direction changes for the season, winding between the mountains. I can never have enough time spent in the mountains here. I walk over the small rise to the west of my campsite, through the fir trees and down to the small farm trail to look further down the valley. After a few minutes taking it all in, the carriage comes by, heading to Königssee. Seeing he has no passengers, I ask if the driver can stop, waving him down. Obliging my request, I inquire if he can come back here to load me up and take me several miles into town. Yes, sir. I have one fare to take to the next village north of Königssee, and then I can come help. It should be this evening if that's all right, he said. Of course. One thing further, if you'll allow me to pay you now, I appear to have collected more samples than I can have trunk space for. Can I give you enough money to buy 2 large trunks as you pass through the village and bring them with you? I asked. This is the only carriage driver in the area who travels between these small villages and is the one who brought me here. I wanted to make sure he had the time today. He thought for a moment, hand on chin. Certainly. There's a shop in the other village I'm going to which has some cases that are handmade and very sturdy, for about the same cost as the ones in Königssee. Excellent, sir. Will 5 gulden be sufficient for the trunks and your help? I asked. Oh, definitely, sir. Again showing his honesty. Well, here, I said, handing him the coinage. It's worth it if we can have me in town tonight so I can catch the train in the morning. A wide, thankful grin spread over his face, nodding as he urged the horses off. I finished packing and labeling the materials and took down the tent. About midday, I walked to the edge of the lake and sat on a fallen pine trunk to try to catch a perch or two for lunch. It wasn't until I had 2 caught and cooked that it occurred to me there may be more to my father's illness than I had first thought. Why wouldn't Professor Templeton want me to head straight home, instead of coming to him first? Why hadn't my mother sent anything? She would surely do so if it were warranted. She had sent me correspondence before, against father's wishes. I'm sure I'm worrying too much, a side effect of knowing how little help I can be to good magicians. It should be about 2 hours until the shade of the mountains passes over the area, so with some time to spare, I decided to walk up towards the sheer mountain side to see if I could find those rare feathers. As I crossed a steep meadow I hadn't been through yet, I noticed a clump of brown amongst the grasses. Picking it up, I'm quite surprised to find it's aurochs dung. A quick crack open and sniff, and yes, it is. Rarest among the dung specimens in the region are droppings from aurochs that have fed heavily on new-growth honeysuckle watered by snowmelt. No one knows why, but only this beast, and this diet at this elevation, yields a magical property. When a mere ounce is brewed with Tibetan tea leaves, a single cup can prolong the life of those suffering from elderly illnesses and wizardry by a whole year. It is highly prized in southern European cities, where many retirees reside. This amount alone can finance my study for another entire season in my favorite and most beloved country to visit, Austria. Pausing, taking in the air, those crisp mountain breezes, to my special nose, also rarest of all the places I have been, I can observe the St. Bartholomew's Chapel red-cap roofs atop the white walls from here. But from where I had camped, it was beyond a small wood, across another meadow, and obscured. Additionally, the green appearance of the water from ground level doesn't reveal the clarity and white rock bed below the surface. However, from this height and distance, the water in bright sunlight appears in various shades of clear blue, green, and deep green, transitioning to black with increasing depth. I was unable to find any of the feathers I wanted, but with the aurochs finding, I was supremely satisfied with my expedition here. I did come across an old friend, a Ravenel stinkhorn. I let a little chuckle loose when I noticed it, remembering the controversy that led to my current employment. That mycological oddity has a unique shape, virtually identical to a part of a man's anatomy, with a pungent odor of raw or sometimes cooked meat. Beneath the surface of the medium in which it grows is a gelatinous blob, roughly the size of a guinea hen egg, commonly called a witch's egg. While both are edible, they serve no known benefit to ordinary people. For individuals with magical abilities, especially women, it can aid in contraception. The whole atmosphere of the silly mushroom is comical. its medicinal use, phallic shape, and all. During medieval times, most clergy demanded that it be destroyed on sight, thereby significantly diminishing the supplies for magical people. One day, during a discussion on this practice in my last year of school, Professor Templeton turned to me and assigned me to develop a plan to educate ordinary people on the Ravenel stinkhorn and try to stop this outdated and prejudicial behavior. I did so by having a cleric who was qualified to minister to magical and non-magical people allow me to prepare them in public for consumption and shackle me to a table in the town square for 2 days. This way, any ill effects on me were going to be for all to witness. I was met with spittle and ridicule, as well as harangues of mocking and shouting by the least civilized among them. However, after the crowd sniffed the divine aroma of it sautéed in butter and realized I was wholly unchanged after the ordeal, the town was convinced, and they were left unmolested and readily available in that region. As soon as I can, I would like to return and spend winter here, in all its resplendent majesty, bathed in snow and glistening ice. I would very much like to spend a great deal more time around Lake Obersee, to the south and east of my current location, and on the east of Lake Königssee. I genuinely think I could spend 20 years between those two lakes and not learn all they have to offer. Even the most perceptive person, as my mother would often say, cannot recall all they've seen, but the longer they spend observing, the more they can perceive. I'm drawn to mountains of stone, the woods they wear like clothing, and the alpine waters they hold in their hands. All stone and wood and natural waters call to me, but here most of all. It was early evening when the driver returned, and his selection of trunks was perfect. He had also arranged for my room at the inn close to the royal house, where he had noted the flag of the consul was up, meaning the council was in residence. I suppose Harold, the driver's name I remember, recalled my arrival in early spring, when he collected me there as a guest of the council. As we loaded and secured the trunks and the roll of canvas tent and its poles in the trailer, I thanked him several times for all his help. And with the discovery of the aurochs gold, I gave him another full golden and shared the last 2 apples I had with the horses, at which he smiled again broadly in appreciation. I tried to absorb the last of the scenery and scents on the way into town, only a few miles, insisting on riding atop the carriage with Harold. Unfortunately, I was constantly distracted by all the things I wasn't able to accomplish on this trip, and made brief notes in my notepad with a pencil as we rode along. My nose perceived at least 30 plant species which I hadn't detected before, and at least one type of pine bark beetle I didn't recognize the sound of. By the time we crossed the first bridge and made it onto the brick and cobble roads, it had become dark. The surrounding mountains were now shrouded in a blanket of clouds. What I could see of them was bathed in deep blue, and I would have to wait until my next visit to witness them again. Little did I know it would be several years, if at all, before I could think of returning. The village marshal was lighting the lampposts as we entered the first row of buildings. Residents were enjoying a walk through the streets, talking and making the most of the shortening summer days before fall arrived. As we rounded the corner to the street with the inn, I thanked Harold again for all his help.
Wo there?
Harold gently pulled the reins, and the chatter of the hooves and wheels slowed and stopped.
With the hour as it is, I believe I will stable the horses and carriage here tonight, right down the street before the next bridge, and stay at the inn as well. Which trunk will you be needing tonight, sir?
Oh, only this one satchel I have with me. I will try to cross the road to visit the Imperial Council right after 9 in the morning, I told him. I shouldn't be there for more than an hour. Afterwards, can we go to the train station?
Absolutely, sir, Harold said. I hope you rest well.
You as well, my good sir. Good night, I said, and stepped off the carriage, tipping my hat to him before he lightly popped the reins to clatter off. I stood stationary a moment, knowing it was going to be a while before I returned, and looked about to examine and remember as much as I could of the town, the mighty oak timber frame buildings, wattle and daub walls coated with whitewash lime, bathed in waves of flickering golden light of the street lamps, the reflections of the damp stones on the roadways and alleys, so different in appearance from the same buildings during the daytime. Since my first visit to Northern Europe as an adult, I felt a deep kinship with the land and structures, which even now is hard to explain. All those friends and acquaintances who have studied engineering and enjoyed the new structures of great cities confirm, in confidence, their attachment to these buildings and hamlets, some more than 2,000 years old, which makes no rational sense, but is present nonetheless. The moon had not yet crested the mountains, and the stars were brilliant with the clear sky over the town, when clouds broke. The aroma of all the flowering plants and grains ready for harvest still filled the air, which is so much more pleasant than the winter to spring months. When everything is covered in snow, it is brilliant visually, but the air is always filled with the scent of wood and coal smoke, boiled vegetables, and various kinds of salted meats. I turned my head and shoulders a bit to look at the stark stone structure behind the high, intricate wrought iron gate of the royal residence in Koenigsee. Moving lazily atop the standard pole was indeed the flag indicating the council, one of my closest friends, was in residence. After waiting for another couple of people of high means to exit a carriage and enter the hotel across the street, I walked over and thanked the doorman with a smile as I entered. The rough-hewn stone exterior, with its protruding oak beams, is very traditional, but the lavish carpets and lamp-work chandeliers in the lobby highlight the exquisite, handcrafted, and upholstered furniture befitting the high status of its guests. Before I can approach the manager's desk, he, in fact, gently touches my right elbow from behind and quietly begins to speak. "Are you here to meet a guest, sir? Might I have your name?" Obviously stating without saying, he felt I was not a usual guest, nor from a status he would expect surveying his lobby. I turn to face him and notice that he is dressed smartly in a thick wool jacket and pants, tailored to fit him perfectly in dark navy blue. His vest was made of blue silk with gold buttons, and the gold watch chain was predominantly displayed from the buttonhole to the watch pocket. His high-collared, stiff white shirt allowed the bright red cravat to stand out. Highly shined, well-heeled boots completed his professional appearance, and his frequently combed hair and manicured beard indicated status in any room. "Tellafrog, sir. Raileanu Tellafrog," I said as quietly as he had spoken to me. A good manager would remember I was here not 4 months ago for a whole week. He should also remember I was here as a guest of the Imperial Council to research the nature of the area. However, I feel it is polite to allow a man who meets so many to think quietly for a moment. "Oh, certainly. The carriage driver came and made arrangements for you earlier." He took the bag from my hand and was now speaking in a normal volume. "Ah, there's a letter here for you as well, brought by the page of the council not an hour ago." "Yes, good sir, thank you. My work is quite important to the council. Could you give me the key to the room and my bag? Within are a few things I would like to retrieve before I take it to my room, and then, sir, I must have something to eat. It has been hours since I dined, and I am quite hungry," I said, gesturing for my satchel, which he gently returned to me. "Of course. I will find you in the restaurant and bring the room key. Please, let me know if there's anything else I can do," he said, eyes looking over my shoulder to the counter where another guest was waiting. "Thank you. Please do not let me keep you," I said, and headed toward the right-hand hallway, which led to the restaurant. I found a table near the stairway from the restaurant to the upper floors. The waiter arrived and I placed my order. Honestly, I can no longer remember what it was. Around the far corner of the bar, I spotted someone whom I had not expected. Monica. As with the first time I encountered her, almost 3 years ago, I forgot to continue breathing for a few moments. I was awkwardly staring, possibly like a child does watching a magician, wondering how it's feasible I am seeing what I am really seeing. Sir, your key? Your key, sir, the manager said, clearing his throat. Thank you, stammered out of me, still trying to break my gaze at her. I took the key and put it in my chest pocket. Approaching from the left was a waiter with my dinner plate and a stein of drink. I was finally able to break my gaze and try to focus on the plate of food, which was so important only 5 minutes before. I didn't succeed. I looked back, and she was looking at me with an adorable, slight smile. She could observe how befuddled I was, and it amused her. She had a piece of pie of some sort and a cup of tea, probably. She waved her fork at me, stating clearly she could tell I was hungry and she was going to wait. Fine, but the food wasn't my main concern. So strange how our souls work in conjunction with this mortal body. Agreeing with myself to not waste her generosity, I begin to eat, but with a desire to finish expeditiously, the opposite of enjoying every bite as I had intended initially. Ah, it was roast beef with potatoes. Very good order. The yeast rolls here are similar to the ones made at local bakers back home in America. With sweet cream butter washed down with good Austrian stout. That's Gemütlichkeit for sure. Now she laughed to herself at how I pretend to eat politely, well, obviously in a hurry to speak with her. I finished quickly, approached the bar to pay, and asked for an order of rolls to take with me on my trip. From here I can see that her table is in a small corner by itself and is also not visible from any point before halfway into the room. The dining area was L-shaped and we had been at opposite ends. She motioned for me to come over. As I was walking around the corner, I felt a bit unsteady for a moment and sensed a shimmer on the last step, almost as if walking through a completely smooth, almost invisible sheet of water. Steadying myself, it's obvious now what is going on. I hadn't remembered the small corner, nor the table she was at last time I was here. I turned around and looked at where the shimmer occurred, and sure enough, it was an illusion. From here I can observe the entire restaurant, but the image is wavy, and this is only noticeable from this side. Monica had allowed the illusion to weaken so that I could spot her here. Turning back, the whole pub for magical people is in plain view. Equal in size to the restaurant for non-magical people, with 50 small tables filled with magic folk, Monica was out the one closest. She must have known I was coming. This pub was possibly 1,600 years old, and all the original building, furniture, and everything were basically timeless. The scent of the hundreds of years of beeswax on old oak is one aroma I'm glad I have stronger senses for. Smirking at her silly trick, I walk the last few steps to her table and sit down. I am sure that anyone reading my story would like me to describe her in great detail, but I am afraid that the detail of her crafting to perfection by the very hand of God is less consequential than the soul that resides in her, and the overwhelming effect of the two on me. Her grip on the root of my heart was immediate on our first encounter, and I had no hope of escape. The details of her earthly shell are mine, and mine alone. We first met 3 years ago in the spring of 1833, at the Habsburg Ball in Vienna, in the world of polite society. That instantaneous sharp stab on me was the same. It is every time we encounter each other. The youngest of 4 daughters of the Binder family, originally from Hungary, Monica's family is always distressed at her not having married again, her first husband dying of fever only 3 months after marriage. The income guaranteed through the marriage, however, allowed her to open several bookbinders' shops throughout the Austro-Hungarian Empire, as well as one each in London and Stockholm. She began. Now that you have eaten your fill and fallen like a lovesick puppy through the Shimmerwall, I promise to stop torturing you. It always amazes me how you look at me, oblivious that everyone around you can detect it. I whipped my head around in an undignified manner to see who it was that noticed me staring at her like that, inciting another giggle from her. No one was looking. All right, I was teasing. Her grin softened to a simple smile. Are you already done with the studies this year? It is a bit early, and the last I heard you had wanted to stay all winter. Trust me, when you are able to, it is incredibly inspirational. Yes, I had intended to. I received a letter from Professor Templeton's this morning stating my father had contacted him, feeling unwell and asking for advice, I explained. Ah, I understand. It might explain why I am here as well, she stated, leaning back a bit in her chair, nodding. The Imperial Council has retained my services to collate your findings and bind them into textbooks over the winter for my role as guest instructor at the school in the far north of the British Isles for next term. He is quite impressed with your work and findings. It appears a peculiarity you share gives him the ability to discern the immense value in your studies that cross magical and non-magical lines. So often, if plant or animal products don't have magical value, our world completely ignores them. Several of your discoveries, in fact, have given rise to shops, particularly in Nordic villages, to benefit both through horticulture. Incredible. There is plenty to consider. Despite or perhaps because of my condition, I can say with certainty that there is little that separates us, and any path forward will require us both to find solutions that benefits the whole world, not just one or the other. I am quite glad you will be compiling this work. The last editors the school used sent me more correspondence asking questions, whose answers could be found a page further in the text than I could count. I leaned back into my chair, waving my right hand outwards, trying to restrain my frustration. I spent more time dealing with pointless blethering 2 years ago than I did on new research. I now know this collection is in the best hands. Here, I retracted my arm and interlaced my fingers in my lap. That being said, I wish I had the volume of letters from you I did from that nincompoop. She pursed her lips and lowered her eyes. I'm sure I detected a bit of blushing. Then, with a widening smile, she said, I shall be writing to you as often as I can find appropriate regarding this project. So, no gentlemen callers? Anyone whom I should place my analytic perception against to test out for you? Hoping both for a no, but also for someone worthy of her whom her family can agree on. I secretly, but wholly, will find happiness in her happiness. Her family had made it quite clear I, being of no noble family, reasonable income, nor possessing any magical ability, stood no chance of courting her. Apparently, at the ball, her mother had seen the way I reacted when I first saw her. After her queries and whispers at the ball, her mother had made up her mind. I understood, for the prospects awaiting her were vast and gilded. I offered little, and any successes we would have would undoubtedly be attributed to the wealth she had access to, not my ability. No, I am and have been committed to the tomes and bindings of new works which advance the world we all share. Not one color sent by a friend or family can tolerate the hours I spend. Not one has intrigued me enough to stop this work, and, honestly, the numbers have dwindled to none this year at all. She reclined all the way back now, sighing a few times before she continued. I think the family has acquiesced to the state of my mind, and no doubt word around the pool of eligible bachelors is that I am not worth their time. When I realized it was happening, I agreed to teach the visiting lecture course. She now looked at me, less emotional and more resolved. Clement has told me this week he should have all the materials for me ready, and I suspected your humble nature would bring you here, and you wouldn't be staying with the council. She stated plainly, waiting to read my response. There is no hiding from you, Monica. Time to let her know I am okay. You perceived every part of my soul at our first encounter, and I, after recovering from blindness, saw yours. I have and always will want you to be happy and content. I can discern no way in the structure of our orbits in this world to change them to suit my courtship. I pray that even if it were to change, you will find someone you can love, that the connection and deep friendship we have will never fail. That outcome would make me very happy. She lightly rolled her eyes, leaned forward, and put her hands on the table's edge. You are one melodramatic gent, you know it? She sighed and sat back against the chair again, folding her arms. We feel the same about each other, and the friendship, I promise, will remain intact. She stretched her right hand across the table. Shake on it? I had never dared touch her. Not politely, not at the ball, not in civil society in any way. I had intentionally avoided it. After all, the effect of seeing her is difficult enough on me physically. Hesitating now, I looked at my hands. They were still dirty from the work of loading and packing everything, much of which included the soils in which I found each specimen. Worse still, they were quite coarse, cracked, and dry. After spending a month in south-central Afghanistan investigating the quality of their black tea leaves, I encountered a lack of humidity level like nothing I had ever experienced before. The fine dust, which masqueraded as sand, would infiltrate into the dry cracks and chew away until every wrinkle of skin bled. In the small town of Calais, which lay in the shadow of a fort built atop a hill by Alexander the Great, the family hosting me showed me how to mix raw sugar, or jaggery, with goat butter and use it as a scrub to abrasively remove dead dry skin and moisturize my hands so they would survive until my body adjusted its oil levels to accommodate the environment. They weren't as bad now, but I certainly wish I had some of that butter sugar scrub and had washed up before eating. She politely waited while I inspected the sandpaper mitt, which used to be a hand. Then I looked at hers, there on the table, reaching toward mine. Even her hand and wrist were incredibly beautiful. I stretched out my arm and took her hand ever so gently and only applied pressure with my thumb on the webbing of her hand before shaking up, down, and let go. Deal, she smiled. She could tell the ridiculous route I had taken in my head to shake her hand. But she understood. I will meet you tomorrow at the royal residence, perhaps. I will be with Clement's wife most of the day. I promise to write, and look forward to seeing you again soon. She stood up and went through the shimmer wall and towards the front entrance. As I watched her leave, the manager came up and had something to say.
Sir, the letter we received earlier from the council was in fact payment for your stay, your meals, and to thank us for accommodating you on such short notice. I hope you will call on me if you need anything else.
The manager stood stiffly and attentively as he spoke. Of course. Thank you very much, I assured him, in my tone and words that I was not expecting anything more than any other member of his guests. I reached into my pocket and retrieved the key. I could tell by the key's ornate nature that it wasn't the room I had stayed in before, on the non-magical side. This was a magical room. Good. The silent spells, as most spells and charms which work on physical things, still work on me. I will sleep warm, comfortable, familiar, and in deep, silent slumber. Engraved on the turn of the key was the number 31. I crossed the room, not another soul, save the barkeep in attendance, and up the stairs to the third floor. The first room on the left was mine. Unlocking, opening the door, and locking it again, I walked to the narrow bed in its cove along the wall and sat down. Within was also a small writing desk with a lamp, a small table with a white porcelain pitcher, a towel, and a wash basin. The window to the left was narrow, perhaps 3 feet tall, hinge-armed and open. On the opposite wall was a tall wardrobe-like cabinet with an open front, featuring an owl perch on top and 3 shelved sections below, each with a small pad on it. Between it and the bed-cove was a low table, wider, for the working of an open trunk, no doubt. The small cast-iron stove on the wall opposite the window was ready for a fire with kindling sticks of rich pine inside, but it was not used normally this time of year. As I began to dress for bed, pulling my nightclothes from the top of the rucksack, McCourt flew in the window with a letter, likely a response from Clement. I finished changing and took the letter, exchanging it for 4 large night-crawlers from the jar in my pack. I sat on the bed, now realizing how exhausting the day had been, packing everything up and simply getting this far. The letter was from Clement, briefly stating that we needed to meet first thing in the morning. There had been updated news about my father, which he had received from Professor Templeton. Interesting. I had intended only to hand over my research materials and his ring. It's strange that he would be involved with my father's news. Regardless, had it been urgent news, he would have sent for me immediately. I am, after all, only across the road from his main gate. I blew out the lamp and sat heavily on the bed. I lay back and pulled the heavy blanket and quilt over myself, exhaled, and closed my eyes. McCourt's low, rocky, gurgled cooing woke me. It was still dark, but the orange glow of the sun's imminent arrival in the east was barely noticeable out the still open window. The number of things I needed to do today looming, I dressed rapidly, fed McCourt, told him where to land at the royal residence, and headed downstairs. I found the manager and inquired what the bill was for my stay, wanting to be certain I owed nothing.
Sir, the Imperial Council has insisted that from this day forth, you are to be extended every courtesy, and he will be sent the bill. It is my honor to have you at
any time, he said proudly and professionally. His early consideration of my status need never be mentioned again by either of us. I proceeded out of the front lobby, as it was closer than the magical side of the building. The sun's warm glow was settling on the morning mists and was beginning to crest the hills behind the royal residence from where I was standing. Not a single carriage in sight, so I crossed the road and approached the main gate.